And we especially need a new generation of young people who can use these kind of competencies to address pressing economic, social justice, and ecological problems. Now, many scholars have written on agency, to whom I'm indebted, but won't be able to give sufficient credit. So now I'm going to discuss agency in this way. Abilities to organize and regulate actions over time, to work towards a long-term goal. So we're talking about work. My focus on long-term projects, weeks, months, as an individual or in collaboration with others. But part of the problem of agency is that reaching goals in the disorderly world ain't easy. To get to be in the real world, you need cognitive skills to navigate ecological complexity. This is too simple. It suggests there's a defined pathway. In real-life situations, you need to find the pathway. You need to get your way through Mirkwood Forest with the challenges, obstacles, and the hidden golems. You need to navigate complex ecosystems with multiple minds. In sum, part of the problem of agency for adolescents is development of cognitive skills, ecological reasoning to navigate the heterogeneity and disorder of the real world. But that's only part of the problem. The capacity to reach goals also depends on a limited human mind, which philosophers for millennia have recognized to be a flimsy and wayward organ. It has its own forms of disorder. Mine does, for sure. I'm going to focus on two major limits or obstacles or challenge of the human mind. First, the ability to get to point B is subject to human emotions. The anger, anxiety, even joy that can arise in trying to reach a real-world goal can disrupt work, derail effort, and distort thinking. That darn IRB is screwing things up again. For adolescents, there's my graphic. For adolescents, puberty increases this human reactivity. Ron Dahl suggests the adolescent brain is like a natural tinderbox in which strong emotions and drives can hijack attention. The second challenge I want to talk about is motivational. To reach a difficult real-world goal, you need tenacious, sustained motivation. Plenty of adults have motivational issues and don't complete goals. Motivation easily stalls. I better check Facebook before working on that darn thesis. Ditto for many teens whose future horizon sometimes doesn't stretch much beyond Friday night. Now, a third challenge or limit of the human mind that I'll only touch on is all those cognitive flaws, fallacies, and biases that psychologists are always uncovering. It's like a cottage industry in psychology, fallacy of the day. Now, you might see these emotional and motivational obstacles as issues of self-regulation, as internal and separate, but many are in response to our interactions with the disorderly external world. So even though, I'm going to treat them, even though I'll treat them separately, they're all part of the same problem. The organization of my talk, I'm going to talk about these three sub-problems then. These problems or challenges and the development of agency skills to address them. And I'm going to cover the human mind challenges first because they're more familiar. So we'll start with the emotional challenges to agency and then use development of emotional competencies to address them. Then the same for motivational development. Then we'll discuss the challenges of a disorderly external world and use development of cognitive ecological skills for navigating it. My talk then will address these three developmental domains, and in each, I want to explore what develops, what types of competencies, skills, insights, dispositions do adolescents gain for being agents? And also, how do these develop? What are the developmental processes? And in order to be coherent, I'm going to zoom in on a specific set of rich contexts. But in the conclusion, I'll zoom out and discuss general implications for positive development. So far, it might seem like I'm a kind of pessimistic grump, and I'll own that. But like other people studying positive development, I hold that despite the limits of the human mind, adolescents have powerful, often unrealized strengths and potentials, including the capacity to be conscious and deliberate producers of their own development. And I want to start by reviewing a little of what we know about these potentials, specifically regards to the adolescent brain and cognitive potentials. So starting with the brain, the public continues to get the wrong message about the adolescent brain. I don't think this whole is what anybody in our field is saying about the adolescent brain. The brain is growing, being pruned and myelinated during adolescence, and we learned a decade ago from research on infancy that a growing and changing brain means this is exactly the period when experience, the environment, may be most important to shaping brain development. A favorite source of mine on this is a dream team of authors on brain and cognition who write, current neuroscience research suggests that environmental factors might profoundly affect brain development in adolescence. Notice the emphatic profoundly. They also suggest adolescence is a critical period for brain development, but also notice the might. Current evidence is correlational. We haven't yet done random assignment studies with teens that would be needed. But an intriguing theory is the idea that there's successive critical periods at different ages in adjacent regions of the forebrain for a developmental progression of higher and higher layers of integration. So what we really need is an image showing the adolescent brain not as having a whole, but as ready and waiting for experience that helps these higher layers of integrative functions develop. So let's talk about these integrative functions. Let me clarify, my focus is going to be on middle adolescence. We've learned that the new cognitive potentials of adolescence are much more diverse than Piaget ever imagined. Research suggests the emergence of an executive suite of capabilities, including principles, planning, goal-directed behavior, selective inhibition, argumentation, epistemic understanding. Research also shows adolescents developing new abilities to think about temporal and causal ordering of human events and the underlying dynamic processes. Just to kind of go ahead a little bit, for coding these, we kind of focused on central concept that we use for higher order functions was dynamic systems thinking about and manipulating relationships and processes in systems. Now, in the recent Adolescent Handbook, Diana Kuhn concludes that adolescent development involves a stronger executive that assists them in the face of multiple, often conflicting task demands and personal goals. That sounds to me a lot like tools for agency in a heterogeneous, conflicting, disorderly world. One quibble here is we have to be careful about not personifying this executive. Current connectionist models suggest the mind develops as an evolving network of eclectic, partly situational, semi-coordinated knowledge and tools. So a limitation of much of this research on the executive suite is that it comes from controlled laboratory research, which of course is wonderful, it's great, it's much more convincing, but it means it's removed from context, and we know how important context is to cognition. So, in terms of those executive skills, we don't know much about what specific executive skills, insights, and tools youth develop for specific real-world contexts. We know even less about how these executive skills develop. We say they're potentials, so why some youth and not others? If their development depends on having the right experiences, well, what are the right experiences? And what does it mean that adolescents are producers of their own development? Following Herbert Simon's advice, one of our first steps should surely be interviewing this executive about her or his experiences, how they produce, what their production processes are in context. And again, I'm going to focus on one context that I think is close to ideal for this, which is organized youth programs. So we're talking about community-based programs, extracurricular activities, and I believe they provide a natural laboratory for studying these potentials, including agency. In many high school programs, youth work on some type of project towards a goal, and they often do so in real-world community contexts or with real-world-like challenges. In the research I'll discuss, half the programs were arts or tech programs, and youth worked on creating a mural or graphics or CDs. The other half were leadership or activism programs, and youth-created events